My friends, today we have a very important topic. I haven't made a single video on this topic yet. Installment plans in the United Arab Emirates. Which developers offer them and what kinds of installment plans do they provide? What initial down payment do you absolutely need to prepare in order to buy an apartment? What conditions do you need to meet in order to buy an apartment on an installment plan in the United Arab Emirates? Let's break down what kinds of installment plans exist in Dubai and for what term. Currently, the maximum installment plan in Dubai is 9.5 years. The record holder here is a developer called Danube who offers such an installment plan in the prime business bay area, where the apartments also come fully finished and furnished, ready to move in. But my friends, this is the only developer who offers such a long installment plan. Let's talk about the average situation, so to speak, the general picture for installment plans in Dubai. As of today, I've identified several types of installment plans that a developer can offer. The first is the most standard installment plan, where the payment is split 60-40. That is, I think about 70% of the market in Dubai now offers this kind of installment plan, where you pay 60% during the construction phase and 40% when you receive the keys. And usually the initial payment is 20% of the apartment's price. Even if agents tell you it's 10%, my friends, be prepared to pay another 10% in a month. So it's really just a marketing ploy when they say the down payment is only 10%. But often, developers will ask for an additional 10% a month or two after you buy the apartment. The second type of installment plan is the post-handover payment plan. We still have such installment options available today. We will also discuss these in more detail and talk about which locations and which developers actually offer these installment plans. Because often, it's most convenient for people to buy an apartment, pay 10% of the price, get an installment plan for 3 years, yes, for 60 or 70% of the apartment's cost, and then pay the remaining 30% over another 3 years after receiving the key. What does such an installment plan offer? This kind of installment plan gives you the opportunity to buy an apartment and pay only 70% of its cost. You can rent out the apartment for another 3 years to cover the remaining 30%. The apartment generates income for you, and you use that to pay off your installment plan. So this is a very convenient installment plan. And the third category of installment plans is the most interesting, in my opinion, the coolest one, when the developer offers you a 30-70 installment plan. That is, there are developers where you pay 30% during the construction phase and 70% when you receive the key. These are just amazing installment plans, especially for investors. So these are people who don't want to pay 60% or even 50% of the apartment's cost during the construction phase. They only want to pay only 30% and then leave the project, make money on it, resell the apartment, and move on to other new projects. The toughest installment plan is the 80-20. I'll tell you which developer offers such an installment plan, but at the same time, this plan also has significant advantages. So you could say, yes, it's the toughest, the most. When you look at it, you think, damn, I have to pay 80% during the construction stage and 20% after receiving the keys. And it makes you a little nervous. But that's not all, guys. We also have a little secret from this developer. Why is this beneficial? I've already told you that the average installment plan in Dubai is 60-40. 60% during the construction stage, 40% after receiving the keys. This is mostly for all the top locations that are currently developing very actively. For example, Maritime City, Dubai Islands, and Al Marjan Island. So in these areas, which are currently developing very rapidly, developers are offering such installment plans. City Walk, MGL, yes, for example, the developer Emirates, I believe, offers a 70-30 plan there. That is, the developer is constantly changing. Somewhere they offer 75-25, but on average, the installment plan is 60-40. Let's talk about where you can buy an apartment with an installment plan after receiving the key. Because it often happens that you are actively chasing after various projects where you can potentially get an installment payment plan after successfully receiving the keys to the property. And often people get confused and think that such installment plans are only available in residential districts. That is, in the residential districts where prices are no longer going to rise, where rental demand is very weak, where the market is basically dead, for example, where you can't even sell your own apartment. And in order for the developer to somehow survive, to somehow sell their apartments, they offer installment plans after you receive the keys. No, my friends, that's not correct. There is a grain of truth in it. Right now, we're going to talk about this in more detail so you can better understand the essence of this installment plan, okay? And in general, who actually offers it? Dubai is divided into many districts, right? So the installment plan also depends on the district. If it's a top district, for example, like Dubai Islands or Maritime City, of course, getting an installment plan after receiving the keys there is practically impossible. But there are projects like that. I'll tell you exactly why. In prominent areas like JVC, JVT, Arjun, and Silicon Oasis, many developers are currently offering attractive post-handover payment plans. Why is that? Because these are residential areas, and these apartments are specifically intended for long-term rental. And of course, it's still harder to sell apartments there than in top locations on the first coastline. So developers are forced to offer such installment plans to attract clients and get them to buy an apartment. But to say that it's a bad idea to buy an apartment there, I would say no, not at all. Because in areas like JVC, and there are also JVT and Arjan, rental properties work really well for many people. And over the past 3 years, prices have increased by almost 37, I think even 40% of the apartment's value. I can actually prove these numbers to you because if in 2022 my clients were buying a 2-bedroom apartment for 1,050,000 dirhams, today such an apartment costs at least 1.5 million dirhams. So there you have it, almost a 40% increase in the apartment's value. And this is just a regular area like JVC. There are even developers there who will never offer you a post-handover payment plan. So you need to understand that everything depends on the developer because people are not only buying into the neighborhood, they're also buying apartments from the developer. They look at the quality, they look at the developer's track record, they also check whether the developer delivers on time. In other words, they look at the project's infrastructure, at how the project looks, and we have top developers who build so well and to such a high standard that they don't even need to offer post-handover payment plans. Everything sells out so quickly for them. Let me just give you some examples so you understand. Let's just take the GVC district as an example for today. In this area, a developer like Imtiaz will never offer you a post-handover payment plan because their projects are bought up instantly, very quickly. And in the JVC area, they have the same standard 60-40 payment plan as in the top districts, top locations, for example, like Dubai Islands. Actually, we have some developers who have always offered installment plans, but after the market started to grow rapidly and gain momentum in the United Arab Emirates, many developers simply stopped offering them. Can you imagine just 3 or 4 years ago, you could get a post-handover payment plan directly from Emirates itself? Emirates itself used to offer such payment plans because the market wasn't as hot back then. Today, the market is so hot that almost everyone has stopped offering them. Developers such as Tiger, Samana, Object One, and ORO24 almost always offer very flexible post-handover payment plans. In other words, they haven't changed their policy even after the market started to pick up significantly and became very hot. Other developers have abandoned this. So, my friends, once again, everything depends on the developer and the area. In other words, these things are very closely connected. Many developers, for example, Imtiaz, are currently building both on Dubai Island and also in Silicon Oasis. And what's most interesting is that Imtiaz, a developer who never offered post-handover payment plans, even during the hot market in 2022 and 2023, is now providing this additional service in the Silicon Oasis area. However, the apartments will be slightly more expensive. I believe it's about 7, 8, or 9% more than the original price. But you get an installment plan on the remaining 40% after receiving the keys for another 2.5 to 3 years. So there is still a difference, right? So for example, if on Dubai Island, the developer Imtiaz does not offer an installment plan after handing over the keys, they're at 60-40 because everything is selling well anyway, then in the Silicon Oasis area, they do provide this additional service. So once again, I'm telling you that everything depends on the district, but not all developers offer such installment plans. Many have stopped doing so. If I want to get an installment plan after receiving the keys, does that mean I can only buy an apartment in a residential area? No, my friends. That's also a misconception because now we're moving on to Dubai Island. This is an island that once again is currently developing very rapidly. Shopping malls, park areas, cafes, restaurants, already operating hotels, a shoreline with white sand, plus transport accessibility to downtown in just about 15 minutes because right now a new interchange is being built there, which is almost completely open already. In addition, 2 more bridges to this island will be constructed. So of course, this district will become extremely popular in the future around 2027 or 2028 when all of this is finished because there are also just clubhouses being built there. That is, these are not high-rises like in the JBR area. And even in this area, friends, we can get an apartment with an installment plan after receiving the keys. Who can offer us such an installment plan? Of course, such an attractive installment plan won't be readily offered by new developers who have just recently entered the market or for projects that are specifically located far from the beachfront rather than directly on the prime first coastline. So again, we have the developer Samana there. Samana is a developer with a track record. They have already completed 3 or 4 projects in Dubai. And you can roughly check, but Samana also launches its projects with post-handover installment plans on Dubai Island. Next, we have a new developer, Main Realty, who has launched their new project Flow Residence. I recently filmed a review of this project. You can follow the link here. This is an entirely new developer who I believe is building their first project in the Arjun area, but they haven't finished it yet. In just about 6 months, they will be handing over their project, so for now, there's simply nothing to show. And to attract clients, they're offering a post-handover installment plan. So guys, in this situation, you should take advantage of such developers because they've entered the market, they've completed all the necessary documentation, and they've proven that they have the right to build. Because even to build on Dubai Island, it puts you through the strictest checks by Nakheel. So, Nakheel is a government developer that checks all the documentation and also verifies whether the developer has the funds to build the project. That's why such projects exist. And those are exactly the ones you need to catch, my friends. Plus, this project is located right in a park area, and just across the road, we have a project from the developer Imtiaz. There are several buildings at once, but you won't get a post-handover payment plan there. The price is the same. I think the quality will be about the same as well. And this is exactly where, guys, you might want to argue with me. Do we believe in the quality of this developer or not? Because if Imtiaz is already building their houses, they've already handed them over, and we can go in and take a look. I have reviews on YouTube about how the developer Imtiaz truly builds. I went in and filmed the brand new houses that they have delivered. Honestly, it's amazing, really cool. So you immediately get a clear sense, wow, these guys know what they're doing. And the level of trust in Imtiaz is already extremely high. Next to them is a new developer who hasn't built anything yet, but they're ambitious and want to prove that they'll build just as well. We have developers like that here. For example, when Sigrex entered the market back in the day, they also claimed that their quality would surpass that of any other developer, and he proved it. So, the people who trusted the developer Sigrex joined his projects and got exactly what they wanted. So here's what happens. When a house is handed over by Imtiaz, it's handed over by Main Realty. That means if you bought from Main Realty, you get an additional 3-year installment plan on the remaining 40%. Can you imagine that? And for those who bought from the developer Imtiaz, they will have to pay the full amount for the apartment in 2.5 years, and only then can they start renting it out and begin to see a return on their investment. But here, you pay 60% and that's it. And at the same time, on Dubai Islands, we also have other developers, for example, Fakhruddin. Fakhruddin is a whole separate topic altogether. Fakhruddin Properties builds in the JVC area. They've also completed projects in Business Bay, and now they're developing new projects in JVT as well. They have also built a lot of commercial properties throughout Dubai and almost right on the first shoreline where no one ever offers post-handover payment plans. It's literally a 2-minute walk to the sea. Can you imagine? 2 minutes and you're at the sea. The developer offers an installment plan for 3 years after you receive the keys for the remaining 40%. Can you imagine? So my friends, there are exceptions. Fakhruddin Properties has one downside to this project. There are no 1-bedroom apartments, only 2- and 3-bedroom units, but that's actually a big plus. Because 2- and 3-bedroom apartments are mainly rented out for the long term, and you won't have that constant flow of tourists renting the apartment for short stay. Plus, it's just 2 minutes to the sea. So it's actually a really great project. Let's also talk about another emirate, for example, Ras Al Khaimah or Al Quwain. What kind of installment plans do we have there? Right now, in the emirate of Al Quwain, it's basically Soba that is the dominant and leading developer. Why is that the case? Because he bought islands like Sinia Island and is developing a new district called Downtown. The developer Soba never offers installment plans after the handover of keys. Nearby, we have Al Marjan Island. This is the island where, as of today, they are building a casino, the first casino in the United Arab Emirates. Due to the high demand because of the casino, developers there also almost never offer installment plans after handover. There, it's 60 to 40. So why, for example, don't developers there offer such installment plans? Because the market there is quite limited. So the very same Al Marjan Island is actually quite small, like a mini neighborhood in Dubai, but significantly several times smaller. Moreover, it's an island, plus it's the first coastline, so it's simply not profitable for developers to offer such installment plans. So if you're looking for an apartment in these locations, then mainly in the top areas, right on the first coastline. For example, the Fairmont residence, which I recently filmed for my YouTube channel. So it's literally a bay, you have the first coastline, you have a beach, the Fairmont brand, and there you won't get an installment plan after receiving the keys. That's how it is, my friends. So let's now get back to the fascinating Dubai market and carefully see what we currently have here, what the government developers are genuinely offering us, what specific terms they are giving us, and precisely why that's good and why it's bad. Before I tell you how to get a 30-70 installment plan, that is 30% during construction and 70% after receiving the keys, let me tell you about the developer Emaar. What kind of installment plan does Emaar offer us? Emaar actually offers the strictest installment plan at the moment, which is 80-20. So when you see an 80-20 plan, you clearly understand that you'll need to pay 80% during the construction phase and only 20% upon receiving the keys. With another developer, for example, during this time, I'd only have to pay 60% and I'd have time to save up the remaining 40% and resell this apartment, right? Or, for example, if after paying 60% I realize I can't pay the remaining 40%, I can resell the apartment before I get the keys. With Emaar, you need to pay 80% before construction and the remaining 20% only when you receive the keys. Why is this so very different? I mean, compared to other typical developers. First of all, Emaar set up this kind of payment plan because all of their projects sell out instantly and quickly. All of their projects are located in the most prime location. And thirdly, the developer builds entire communities. So Emaar developers are not the kind of developer that builds standalone houses in different areas. So when Emaar strategically acquires a plot of land, they meticulously purchase an entire neighborhood and then comprehensively develop it completely. For example, areas like Dubai Creek Harbor, Dubai Hills, Mina Rashid, these are really, or Downtown, which they built. These are large, major districts developed by Emaar. The thing is, Emaar doesn't build a house in 2.5 years like other developers do. So yes, if we're talking about clubhouses, they're built in about 2.5 years. High rises take about 3 years. Other developers give you an installment plan for 3 years. But with MR, the average installment plan is almost 4 years. And they also build it in stages so that when you move into your apartment, you receive the infrastructure, not just an empty field, not a desert, but actual infrastructure. Because of this, the timeline is extended, and as a result, you also get a longer installment plan. If you buy an apartment with an installment plan of 3 years, where it's 60-40, you need to pay 60% over 3 years. And in the third year, you have to come up with the remaining 40% and pay for the apartment. So in other words, within 3 years, you need to pay 100% of the apartment's cost. But with the developer MR, if you're not in a hurry, the installment plan is for 4 years, and over those 4 years, you need to pay 80%, with the remaining 20% due when you receive the key. So it turns out that with the developer MR, even though it might seem like their installment plan is stricter, in reality, it's actually one of the most flexible ones, an 80-20 split, because the term is longer, and all of MR's projects today are snapped up instantly under this kind of payment plan. For example, in Dubai Hills, a new cluster, a new project was recently launched, and literally everything was sold out in just 2 days. In Dubai Creek Harbour, we also have a new cluster launching with a park area, where there will be a new school and a metro line, so properties there are also being snapped up quickly with this 80-20 payment plan because it's very convenient. So that's how it is. The next type of payment plan we currently have is a 1 to 1.5 year installment plan. We have an exceptional developer here, and I would certainly call them a true champion developer. Binghatti implements all their projects instantly, very quickly. So, for example, an average building in the JVC area, that is in residential districts, if it's a small building, it will be sold out within a year. So you get a 1-year installment plan. So the developer Binghatti does not offer installment payments after you receive the keys. He simply says, guys, you have 1 year. Within this year, you must pay me in full for the apartment, but in return, I will hand over the apartment to you quickly. So, in this particular situation, when you truly want to buy a ready-made apartment for yourself and genuinely don't want to wait a very long time, but you simply can't get a mortgage approved, you don't have the opportunity to secure a job in the United Arab Emirates, you can't officially receive a consistent salary in order to obtain that very mortgage, but you want to get the keys to your apartment as quickly as possible, and at the moment you don't have 100% of the money for the apartment, but in about a year you will have that money. But you don't want to wait a year, because in a year prices here will go up by about 10%. In this situation, we have the developer Binghatti, who will build your home in literally 1 year, and you'll have the keys in your hands. Here, the installment plan is also quite interesting, 60-40, 70-30, depending on the district where you are buying an apartment. The initial payment is 10%, and then you just keep going, moving forward. In a year, you get the keys, rent out the apartment, and everyone is happy. But the projects that the developer Binghatti is currently implementing in the Business Bay area, such as Mercedes, these are branded projects like Bugatti as well. In these projects, the developer sets deadlines of 1.5 to 2 years. So this is also a very good time frame because no other developer will deliver in that period. As for quality, let's set that topic aside for now. I'm only telling you about the installment plan because I can even give you an example. I have a client who bought an apartment from the developer Binghatti in the JVC area. Amber, I think Amber is the name of the project, a 2-bedroom for 1,050,000 dirhams. 1,050,000 dirhams. As of today, we have rented out this apartment long-term for 110,000 dirhams. After deducting all expenses, that's a net 9% annual return. Can you imagine? That's 9% per year. A couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years back, many agents and even some of my clients told me that you couldn't make those kinds of numbers with Binghatti. Guys, you can make money, you just have to look at the price because people in areas like JVC are not wealthy. So this is the middle class earning around 20,000 dirhams a month. That means they can afford to rent an apartment in the JVC area, whereas in Dubai Hills, it's quite expensive. That is, the price there is almost twice as high. That's why, my friends, Binghatti is a record holder for the fastest apartment handover and for the shortest installment plan. These are the types of installment plans we have in the United Arab Emirates. Probably the last question you want to ask me is, Andre, could you please tell me what documents I need to provide to get approved for that very installment plan to buy an apartment? All you need is your international passport, phone number, email address, and your place of residence. That's it. And fill out the KFC form. You don't need to apply like you would for a mortgage or prove that you can pay for this apartment and all that jazz. That's how it is. You submit the documents and off you go moving forward. If you can't make your installment payments, if you don't pay on time according to the payment schedule, then my friends, you'll be charged penalty. Each developer has their own penalty fees and they can be quite substantial. If you did not pay on time, and if you did not notify the developer in advance that you were having some issues and would like to resolve them within, say, 2 months and then make the payment, then the developer might still be willing to meet you halfway and simply not impose a fine or penalty on you. But if you stay silent and don't respond to the developer, they'll charge you all possible penalties. So the amount will be quite large. So that's the first risk. If you can't pay for the apartment on time, in principle, it's the same with a mortgage. When you have a payment due and you don't pay on time, they also charge you penalties there. There's nothing unusual about that. But the most important thing is the second point. When you can't pay for the apartment, the developer has the right to simply take your apartment and not pay you anything. So if you've paid for the apartment, say 30% of the cost, and you need to come up with another 40% to resell the apartment, but you're missing that 10% and can't pay, then the developer will send you an official letter stating that if you don't pay for the apartment, they are ready to terminate the contract. This is specified in the contract. The developer has the right to terminate the contract in their favor. That is, all the money you've paid for the apartment, the developer will simply keep for themselves. There are some developers who might compensate you for a portion of it. This is also specified in the contract, and you absolutely need to read. Therefore, when you receive an important SPA contract from your trusted agent, my dear friends, make sure to carefully read through the entire contract. The contract specifies penalties, and it also outlines what severe consequences you might face from the developer if you are unable to pay for the apartment. So all of this is spelled out as well. That's why the most important thing is, if you're buying an apartment on an installment plan, don't do it hoping that, oh well, I'll figure it out later, I'll find the money somewhere. No, my friends, if you don't have that opportunity, it's better not to take the risk. You could lose absolutely everything. If you want to buy an apartment in the United Arab Emirates to rent out, to resell for yourself, for vacation, or for living, always reach out to me. My phone number is in the pinned comment. My dedicated specialist from my esteemed company, Empire City, will promptly contact you and provide you with a comprehensive consultation. They will thoroughly inform you about the current and emerging projects on the market, highlighting which ones are the most interesting and highly in demand so that you can effectively profit from them. That's all, guys. Goodbye to everyone.